Hey, what's up, everybody? It's been a while since I've done a book review, so I thought I'd catch you up on some recent reads, all of which are pretty good. First, we have In the Heart of the Amazon Forest by Walter Henry Bates. This man was a naturalist and explorer who lived during Darwin's time in the 1800s. If you've heard of Batesian mimicry, this is who it's named after. Batesian mimicry is when animals evolve a life preserving defensive feature of looking more like something that the predator would normally avoid when the predator would otherwise prey on this animal. This is easily confused with Müllerian mimicry, the big difference being that with Müllerian mimicry, the mimic is not actually suitable prey to begin with. Surprisingly, though, this book didn't even talk about Batesian mimicry. It features select excerpts from his larger book, Naturalist on the River Amazons, published in 1863, and it's like reading a journal. It's part exploration, part documenting of the cultures of the tribes that he's spending time with, and part documenting of the flora and the fauna of the jungle. That was my favorite aspect of the book. And considering how long ago this all took place, it's just that much more incredible to read about this guy's adventures into the Amazon. This book will give you some idea of what it must have been like for Bates to actually be out there exploring in the jungle. I think a lot of people have some part of them that desires to experience undeveloped wilderness, and reading this book appeals to this desire, or at least it did for me. Next, we have My Life in Science by Sidney Brenner, South African Nobel Prize winning biologist known for his work in genetics. This book is a written version of an interview between Brenner and Louis Wolpert, which can be found in video form on YouTube by a channel called Web of Stories. It's essentially a biography detailing Brenner's education and career as a scientist. And man, this guy is the definition of inspirational. He was a genius self learner. He decided what things he wanted to learn, and then he'd just go to the library and learn them. Yeah, this was before internet. And I'm talking about things that normal people would need to take advanced classes for. If you watched my review for Gene Machine by Venki Ramakrishnan or Neanderthal Man by Svante Pabo, this book is pretty similar to those, down to their senses of humor. It's about a scientist making advances in genetics and eventually winning a Nobel Prize, except for with this book, it actually came out a year before he won the Nobel Prize. Though he may have suspected that he was going to win, there is no mention of the Nobel in this book. But Brenner is a pretty big deal in genetics. His work involves huge advances in our understanding of apoptosis, or programmed cell death, the discovery of messenger RNA. He sequenced the first animal genome in Caenorhabditis elegans, and he's the person who invented the term codon. If you've studied genetics, you've learned about some of the work from this genius of a man. A great read for science lovers, especially genetics, and it will inspire you to want to go learn more. Next, I have to talk about Understanding Nutrition by Whitney and Rolfes. I wouldn't expect anybody to go out and buy this book because it's pretty expensive, and maybe you don't need a book to tell you what you should or shouldn't be eating, but man, this book really did change the way I think about the choices that I make concerning nutrition. It can really put into perspective what's going on with the different things we're eating when we learn about how it all works. Everyone knows that they should be eating healthy and avoiding certain foods, and this book will teach you why and what foods you might think of as bad or as healthy. To sum up, get a wide array of fruits and vegetables, get plenty of fiber, eat whole foods, get a complete protein profile, eat less meat but more fish, avoid trans fats and hydrogenated foods and saturated fats. Make sure you're getting monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, and be aware of how processed foods that you're eating are, the sodium intake and the sugar intake, hydration, and we have to know our own body so that our intake can better suit our personal needs, considering things like our family history or our genetics. And then the book is just filled with things that are good to know that can serve you your whole life. For instance, I had no idea that there was a link between grilling meat and cancer. This book gives the reader a lot to think about. Just try to find a used copy if you're interested. And the last book I want to talk about is Compost Science for Gardeners by Robert Pavlis. It's just what it sounds like. Compost is a pretty fascinating subject. If you're a nature person, you probably think that the food cycles between animals, plants, fungi, protists, and bacteria is pretty fascinating. There's a lot going on here, and it can get a little complicated, but Pavlis breaks it all down for us in a way that anybody can appreciate. Break it down. That's a compost joke. The book is actually pretty surface level information, and Pavlis doesn't really go into much detail on these cycles, but you'll learn what compost really is and what's going on in it. You'll learn how to do it and the various ways of making it and the different ways of using it. Something I really like about Pavlis's books is that he likes to address myths, and there are a lot of them when it comes to gardening. Pavlis does take a fairly science-oriented approach in this book, but nowhere as much so as with his other book, Soil Science for Gardeners. I don't have a copy of Soil Science for Gardeners because I listened to the audiobook for that one, but it's a much deeper and denser book than Compost Science for Gardeners. If you're into gardening, I'd recommend reading them both, especially if you're interested in science too. Each of these books were pretty interesting for their own reasons, but out of all of them, My Life in Science by Sidney Brenner resonated the most with me, just because I really admire the guy and his attitude concerning education. He really inspired me to be more proactive in my own learning, which was already like my favorite hobby. So I've been combining this kind of thinking with what I've learned from neuroscience books, which is that the brain craves novel challenges, especially where healthy aging is concerned. It's not the guy who does the crossword all the time, it's the guy who does something new and challenging all the time. So I've been studying something that I never learned before, which is chemistry. I told myself that I wanted to use the internet or books to try to teach myself either chemistry or calculus because I never took either of those in high school or college. And I found out that you really need to understand trigonometry before you learn calculus. And since I don't even really know what trigonometry is, and plus chemistry is a subject whose absence has been an unignorable void in my education, so I'm just doing it. At least a little bit, you know. I'm not trying to master the field or anything, but I would like to learn enough to be able to have a conversation about it. And I think it was Sidney Brenner who really lit the spark of inspiration for me. So please, if you have any advice or recommendations for a guy who doesn't know anything about chemistry but wants to, let me know. And if you don't mind sharing, what's a subject that you've done this with? You just say one day, I want to learn this. Maybe you studied another language or took up a skill that you've never done before, like shooting a bow or sculpting or stargazing or baking, anything. Or if you have not done this, what is something that you would pick if you did decide to do this? Okay, that's it for this one, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If any of these books sound interesting to you, check them out or feel free to ask me more about them. And happy Father's Day to all the dads out there.